do a lot of work for the Nature Conservancy, volunteer work, and some writing for their magazine. So there's a lot of cross-pollination going on here among folks who care about creatures like saw whet owls. Things that we need to know about these birds we didn't know before. One is the fact that they're incredibly common. We didn't know that. We didn't know the Appalachians were a major travel route, major migration route for them. One of the things that we've been finding out with this radiotelemetry study that we're doing, nobody had a clue what kind of habitats these birds were using during their migration, especially during these what appear to be fairly long periods when the birds aren't migrating, when it's known as migratory stopover, when they're just resting and refueling between active migration bouts. And we've been working mostly in Michoud State Forest in Cumberland County, and we found that out of the probably about 150 daytime roosts that we found of saw whet owls, about 90% of them are in pitch pines. And if you talk to the average forester, they'll tell you pitch pine's a junk species. We don't need it. When they do an improvement cut on an area of forest, they usually cut all the pitch pine down to make room for the better trees. It turns out if you're a saw whet owl, there is no better tree in the wintertime. So, there's always a risk when you have a species that you don't know much about that you're inadvertently going to do something that harms it. So a lot of this is just getting basic information about what we used to think was a rare species, but is probably one of the most, if not the most common small forest raptor anywhere in North America. And it's amazing to think, here we are in Pennsylvania, all the way back to Alexander Wilson and William Bartram and John James Audubon. People have been studying the birds of Pennsylvania for the better part of 3 centuries. And here's an incredibly common bird, which up until 10, 12 years ago we didn't know was incredibly common. It's an indication of how little we still know about literally about our own backyards. And we set them up in the woods, and we open them up at dusk, and they're so fine that when they're open, you guys can attest to this. You can't see those nets, can you? Because you were helping me set up some other nets down here. So we set the net up, and we start playing a digital recording of the saw whet owl's call, which is that toot, 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 toot that you heard. And some more folks coming. The idea is that as these owls are flying over, as they're migrating south, they'll hear that call and be curious, enraged, amorous, who knows? There's really no reason why they should be responding to that call, but they do. They come down, they investigate it, get tangled in the nets. We open the nets, what, about quarter of, Karen? Doesn't matter. Okay. 5:30. 5:30. We open the nest at 5:30. We'll go up at 6:30 and do our first net check, and then we'll do that every hour up until midnight. And a sequential serial number on each of them, and it goes on the bird's leg with a special pair of pliers, and it's just like wearing a bracelet. It's on there for the rest of the bird's life. It doesn't hurt the bird at all. It doesn't weigh the bird down any more than my wristwatch weighs me down. We age and sex the bird, and we'll talk more about that once we've got a bird in the hand. Take a series of measurements. We'll take an adoption picture. One of the ways that the Ned Smith Center supports this project is by selling owl adoption certificates. You could adopt an owl yourself. I'm not pressuring anybody, but I'm just saying. And then we let the bird go. If we're really cranking along, we can do it in about 5 minutes. And then we put them back in the bag, put them in a back room back there for about 5 minutes to let their eyes readjust to the darkness. Take them outside, and we'll do this with the assembled folks. We won't use any cameras or flashlights or anything, but we'll go out in the back here where it's dark. Let our eyes adjust to the darkness. And then I'm assuming there may be 1 or 2 small people who would like to let an owl go. 18.2. There we go. Now, the first thing we need to do is put a band on this owl. And we have 2 possible band sizes that we can use. And so the first thing we'll do is figure out if, like most owls, she takes a size 4 band, which she does, most saw whet owls. And for the sake of those who came a little later, we were talking earlier about the bands are supplied to us by the Federal Bird Banding Lab down outside of Washington. That's the only thing the government gives us. Banders are responsible for providing all the rest of their equipment. The band has a serial number on it, which is 0924-59398. These bands come in strings of 100, and we're just about to finish up this string. So the pliers I have here open the band up in a nice little C shape, and that's going to go around her right leg, and will stay on there for the rest of her life. I'm not going to hurt her at all in doing this. The band isn't going to interfere with her at all. And this pair of pliers will form a perfect little circle. I spin the band around, that gets the feathers out of the gap before I close it up. And there it is. And it will stay on there forever. And if another bander finds her down the line, which happens about 3 dozen times a year, we get one of our birds picked up somewhere else, or we catch somebody else's bird. And they report that band number. That's how you start connecting the dots and figuring out where these birds are.
That's what you want.
Flying. Exactly. And also, if 10 years from now somebody catches that bird, we'll know that they live at least 10 years. We know from banding that saw whet owls are actually not terribly long-lived owls. 3 to 5 years is probably their average maximum lifespan. And as with most birds, most of them never make it to their first birthday. About 70 or 80% of them probably die before they're a year old. And that's the same whether you're talking about ruby-throated hummingbirds or bald eagles. Doesn't really make that much difference. The first year of life is tough for any bird.